The technologies even of being able to extract oil have shifted hugely in the last 30 years. 30 years ago, they said you couldn't dig for oil more than 1 kilometre deep. They're now going to 8 kilometres deep. All of that's changing as well. And so what we're saying is that the theories of saying that there will be a point of peak oil and this is going to cause some catastrophic collapse in civilization and economies is flawed. As it becomes more shorted, it's going to become more expensive. As it becomes more expensive, that will drive innovation and alternatives.
Look, I think you've got to look at, Maori have this concept of Papa Tuanuku, the Mother Earth, and Sky Father. You can't keep taking out of the environment and not putting anything back. And if, you've identified population growth, you've identified the climatic change as two of the major problems. They're all related to oil. If you have a look, for the first 10,000 years, our population grew to 1.5 billion. Since 1900 to 1960, 60 years, we doubled to 3 billion. In the last 30 years, we've doubled again to 6 billion, and it's all because of oil. It coincides with the use of oil, taking this out. The hole in the ozone, it's all to do with the way we live and the lifestyle that we've chosen. So, this has got to stop. And if we do get back to a more sort of environment-friendly way of life, then that will heal, and we won't have diabetes because we won't be eating so much sugar. It's all related. It's a whole way of life.
I think there are two problems with Nick's proposal that the market will deliver alternatives. The first one is that the technologies that are most advanced now in terms of providing alternative energies are going to take a couple of decades to get to market. Coal, sequestration of carbon from coal so that you can use coal without climate change, hydrogen, fuel cells, all of those are a long way away, and they require a complete change in all the energy-using technologies. Hybrid cars still use... Look, a hybrid car, a Prius, uses almost as much petrol as my little Honda Jazz does because it's a bigger car. We've got to think that beyond just big cars using a bit of electricity.
But it uses petrol to create
of course
the car.
Exactly. The
if
other
every car
problem
converted to a
with
hybrid would use half the fuel consumption. Every car in New Zealand had a hybrid motor.
But that's only part of it, isn't it? I mean, if you drive to work, you see just about every New Zealander who drives to work drives in a car alone. When President Bush talked about Americans' addiction to oil, I mean, New Zealanders have an addiction to oil. We like our big cars, we like being able to drive to work, we like being able to drive on our own to work so we can have the radio switched up loud and all the rest of it.
So we are making progress, Linda. I mean, if I could cut in here.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some truth in all of these statements. I agree that we ought not to focus only on roads, but we're not. We've doubled the amount of money that's going into new roads, but we've increased the amount that's going into public transport sixfold.
Yeah, but hold on a second. When the developer comes up with the bright idea for another subdivision on the fringes of the ever-expanding Auckland, who asks the developer any questions about whether or not this is good for the country? No one does.
The person who buys the section.
That's a very good point. I agree with that. I actually do think we have to look at what are the real costs of where we site subdivision. I don't agree that they should be absolutely banned in these areas, but we should force the full costs of those inappropriate subdivisions in inappropriate places to be a cost for that subdivision rather than a cost for the rest of us.
But I mean, Peter Lloyd said to us on Monday, a figure that really stuck in my mind, 37,000 hectares of land were converted to suburban houses in New Zealand last year alone. Now, if oil is depleted, if oil does become more expensive and the supply of it is less stable, those people are going to be living a long way away from probably where they work, probably where they need to go, and that land could be much more effectively used growing some of the food that we will no longer be able to import.
And some of them will in their back gardens, and suburban gardening is likely to come back as the food supply chain gets longer and more fragile.
Pretty hard to do that in Auckland now with infill housing. I mean, everybody's got rid of the backyard.
I did it on 1/6 of an acre in Auckland, produced all of our vegetables. I mean, it can be done. But look, can I just make one more point about the big global picture before we get, and I think we should get down to what New Zealanders should do here. But the other thing that Nick is ignoring, I think, in his scenario, is that demand for oil is not staying stable. The growth, 80% of the oil that's been used so far has been used by the OECD countries, who represent only a fraction of the world's population.
This is the China and
India are growing incredibly fast. Their demand for oil is huge. We are likely to get war between the US and China once world oil supplies can no longer meet their demands, because they are head-to-head in terms of who is going to control this. But quite apart from war, once those two giants start scrambling over what's left, as the US is already doing in Iraq...
Because the country...
where do we fit into that?
The giant power that has the control or the access to the oil will stay rich.
Yes, relatively to
For a
the
while.
rest of the world for a while. You're quite right, Peter. Yeah.
But the oil reserves are far more diverse around the globe than what Jeanette's giving credit for. If you look at in terms of the big oil producers in South America, what's being produced out of, in terms of the Asia Pacific, what's being produced in Europe.
China's growing 10% a year.
Yes,
This
it
is
is.
kind of unimaginable. And 10% when you start off with the population base they've got, they're just like the great hungry enzyme.
China's got oil contracts with Iran. Why is President Bush saber rattling at Iran? Because Iran's oil is not actually
Because they're
going to
trying
be
to get nukes.
susceptible to US control. I think that's
All
a
right, we're
smoke screen like weapons of mass destruction.
Just
Hang
one
on,
point,
hold
I
on.
think-
We're going to take a break. We're going to come